city of Rome, also known as the Eternal City, has borne witness to the lives of many holy apostles like Saints Peter and Paul. But Rome has also seen the footsteps of many hidden saints. In this special episode, we'll bring you to the places in Rome of St. John Bosco, founder of the Society of St. Francis de Sales, simply known as the Salesians. St. John Bosco, known endearingly as Don Bosco, was born in northern Italy and lived there most of his life, where he began his work in service of young people. In fact, St. John Paul II declared him father, teacher, and friend of the young. The remains of St. John Bosco are in the Basilica of Maria Ausiliatrice, Our Lady Help of Christians, in Turin. A place of devotion that welcomes many pilgrims from all over the world. Few people know that also in Rome there are significant places that saw important moments in the life of St. John Bosco. This is the present headquarters of the Salesian General Curia. And that's where we caught up with Father Ángel Fernández Artime, Rector Major of the Salesians and 10th successor of Don Bosco. He accompanied the EWTN team through some of these places unknown to many. First stop, the Don Bosco Rooms, a place worth visiting.
Nos encontramos en el lugar salesiano.
We find ourselves in the most sacred Salesian place in Rome. What exists in the Salesian world in Rome is the most significant. And why? Because Don Bosco was here. He came in 1887, in the month of May. He spent 18 days in Rome for what would be the last time in his life. He came because the consecration of the Basilica of the Sacred Heart was pending. Here he stayed for 18 days. In this place he rested. He spent the night. In this altar behind us, he celebrated the Eucharist for 17 days, and here 2 miracles of healing took place, as well as many very special situations of spiritual direction or of people who discovered the moment of their conversion.
But what is it about Don Bosco's personality that's still attractive today?
I can assure you that Don Bosco is very much loved, because he is seen particularly as the saint of the Catholic Church, who loved young people and sought their good, with so much sympathy, with a strong connection with the world of youth. There are so many things he had in his time that today we also try not to lose. Above all, his great educational and evangelizing passion for young men and young people in general. And then he thought about the girls too, dreaming up a feminine branch with the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians to do the same, as he had done in Valdocco, with boys and the first Daughters of Mary Help of Christians in Mornese.
This room remains almost in its original state and preserves many of the objects used by Don Bosco during his stay in Rome. Some of them are part of a small Roman Don Bosco museum, which is located in the center of the city next to the Basilica of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Basilica of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, built thanks to the efforts of St. John Bosco, is just a few meters from his rooms. This basilica also contains the most significant Marian place for the Salesian family.
We are in the Basilica of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. We stay in the Basilica of the Sacro Cuore, a very special basilica because it was a temple that Pope Pius IX requested from Don Bosco.
Don Bosco comenzó la construcción con mucho sacrificio.
Don Bosco began the construction with much sacrifice, thinking it would be dedicated to St. Joseph initially, and there was a time when they had to suspend it because they had no financial means whatsoever to continue it. After Pope Pius IX died, Pope Leo XIII, after a while, tells him, Don Bosco, I want to ask you this. You have to continue this work, and I will start by helping you a little. Don Bosco took this as a great duty because he understood that a request from the Pope from him and the Salesians is, at minimum, something that must always be taken seriously.
Es algo que siempre hay que tomar muy en serio.
Pope Leo XIII pointed out to Don Bosco that at the time there was no church in Rome dedicated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. He encouraged the work to promote this special devotion, which is also very special to the Salesians.
Es una devoción en la iglesia cada vez.
It is an ever-deepening devotion in the Church because it speaks of this unconditional love of the Lord Jesus for humanity, for all of humanity. For us Salesians, it's very special. Also for the Basilica, also for the Temple of Tibidabo that we have in Barcelona, and because we have all the houses of formation under the care and sponsorship, the protection of the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Del Sagrado Corazón de Jesús.
But the construction project was too much physical effort for Don Bosco.
La construcción de este templo.
The building of this church, all the sacrifices, all the trips he had to make to Spain and France to seek help to finance it, also ended up sending Don Bosco much closer to death. In fact, it was inaugurated on the 17th of May 1887, and Don Bosco died on the 31st of January 1888.
De 1888.
Additionally, in this basilica, a very important Marian place is preserved, the altar of Our Lady, Help of Christians, also known as the Altar of Weeping.
Este altar que vemos aquí con este cuadro.
In front of this altar that we see here with this painting, everything is original. The whole basilica from Don Bosco's time. In front of this altar, on May 16th, 1887, the day before the consecration of this basilica, Don Bosco celebrated the Eucharist at 6:30 in the morning.
Una Eucaristía.
Just that celebration of the Eucharist lasted 2.5 hours. He was only with his secretary and 2 or 3 others. Why did it last so long? Because Don Bosco was so moved that he could no longer celebrate the Eucharist, because he cried and became emotional. In fact, 15 times he interrupted the celebration, which is why we know it as the altar of Our Lady Help of Christians, the altar of the tears, of Don Bosco's weeping, but also of great joy. It was at that moment that he understood that she, Our Lady Help of Christians, had done everything, had accompanied him and led him by the hand in all his missions throughout his life.
And it was this spiritual experience that helped Don Bosco to understand that what he had dreamt of in his childhood was being fulfilled.
Don Bosco mismo.
Don Bosco narrates the story himself already in a mature period because his bishop asked him to. It tells a little bit of the story of his life. We know of it as the memoirs of the oratory. He tells that at the age of 9 he had a dream where the Lord appeared to him who was brilliant, resplendent, who was Jesus. The Lord showed him his mother, who was the Virgin, and it was this lady in the dream who tells him, Juanito, in time, you will understand everything. Don Bosco, almost at the end of his life, has a kind of revelation in which he understands that he has been carried by the love of God, and the Mother of Heaven, the Mother Helper, has taken him by the hand in all the projects, undertakings, and even sufferings that he had to face.
And here you can see just how important the advocation of Mary, help of Christians, was for Don Bosco and the entire Salesian community.
It is very interesting to see how Don Bosco matures in his Marian devotion. When he was a young seminarian, his great devotion was the Consolata in Turin, the patroness of Turin. When the dogma of the Immaculate Conception was proclaimed, Don Bosco, who was also a charismatic teacher in the Spirit, encourages his boys to further their devotion to Mary of the Immaculate Conception. Moreover, in 1868, he has the intuition that the Virgin Mary is, first and foremost, Mother of the Church and helper in difficult times. And he says to his closest Salesians, from now on, Our Lady wants us to be devoted to her as Mother Helper. And since then, the Salesian family's devotion to Mary as helper is very special in the world. I cordially greet you. We're here in Rome at the Salesian headquarters, the general curia of a congregation, and we find ourselves in what we know as the chapel of the 1884 Rome letter.
De la Carta de Roma del 1884.
This small chapel, which at that time was a bedroom, is very important for the contents of the letter he wrote.
Es importantísimo porque Don Bosco se encuentra.
It is very important because Don Bosco wrote this letter 3.5 years before his death. He died January 31st, 1888. He was here doing many of the negotiations in the Vatican for the approval of all of his institutions. He carried a sadness in his heart. The sadness was this: the fear that in the future of his works, his oratories, they would not be like the first oratory in Valdocco.
Oratorios no fuesen como el primer oratorio en Valdocco. Entonces él escribe una carta.
So he writes a letter in which he has a dream, and a former student shows him in the dream how Valdocco is, the first oratory, but how it is at the moment. And Don Bosco was frightened because he did not find the atmosphere of joy, of youthful enthusiasm, of the work of his boys, of holiness, of piety, at least not as he experienced it and wanted it. There they are, the first Salesians, other Salesians who arrived later. There were 500 young people in the oratory, but he has this concern. So he writes this letter, and it is like a will, saying, My dear Salesian brothers, let us not forget that the Salesian spirit must be that of the first oratory, the family spirit, closeness to children, to be with them and lead them on a path of holiness.
Muchachos, estar junto con ellos y llevarles a un camino de santidad.
Today, the charism with which the Lord inspired Don Bosco extends across the world. The Salesian congregation continues to work with the charism of Don Bosco for young people. As is the case of the Salesian Oratory of the Sacred Heart, where apostolic work for young people is carried out, among whom there are also young people of different religions.
We are 14,500 Salesians in number. In the world altogether, as a Salesian family, there are 360,000 of us. There are 32 groups within the Salesian family, and we in particular the Salesians of Don Bosco have 1,936 outposts in the world, some of which have 3, 4, 5 great works at the same time. I sincerely believe that the young people of the world need, and the boys and girls of the world today need the charism of Don Bosco and the love of Don Bosco for Jesus and the great devotion to Nuestra Madre Auxiliadora. Today, it is up to us to do this in the name of Don Bosco.
And precisely youth ministry has recently been at the center of the Church's attention, thanks to the recent Synod of Bishops on Young People, a theme that parallels the charism of the Salesian congregation.
En mi opinión, está siendo un
In my opinion, it is a time of grace for the whole Church, within the Holy Father's idea to think first of the family. Without the family, we can do nothing with the young and for young people.
En los jóvenes.
Father Ángel Fernández Artime was one of the Synod Fathers at this church event, in which the situation of young people of the world was reflected upon.
I think it has been a great opportunity for the Church to be open to listening to and accompanying the young people of the world. And for us, the Salesian family and the Salesians of Don Bosco, it has been a great gift from the Church and from the Father to begin to reflect on and to think about how to be close to young people today. For us, it is a great call, and it is an opportunity for an even more authentic vocational response, because young people are our charism, a charism which was received from the Holy Spirit through Don Bosco.
It's a great responsibility that the Rector Major of the Salesian is called to, the mission of the 10th successor of Don Bosco.
It's a precious time, a time of grace. I'm living it as an undeserved reality. At the same time, I can honestly tell you that I am giving all that I have, my life, my heart, with true passion for evangelization and education. Touring the Salesian world, trying to help with all the support I have in my council. And the community I'm in, to accompany all the Salesian world in 134 nations where we are, really a grace that I experience day by day. That I am not alone, because it is true what St. Paul says about the Lord. My grace is sufficient for you. I feel His grace. I live His grace in this way. And for me, the prayer of so many people is a very special gift, many of whom I don't even know, but they know me, and that gives such a spiritual fruit, so much peace, so much serenity.
Concluding our visit, the Rector Major of the Salesians wished to send out a message to those planning to visit the Eternal City soon.
I invite you not just to make a cultural tour during your stay in Rome, because Rome is for meeting with God, to meet the Lord, to meet the witnesses of faith, for example, to meet Saints Peter and Paul, and to find oneself amid so much holiness, among which is the Salesian sanctity of Don Bosco.